Hey guys, Chris Murphy here. I've got the amazing Paul Janka with me today. Hey Paul.
Hey, Chris, what's up?
Yeah, so Paul is I'm really big fan of Paul's. It's one of the most popular videos we had on my YouTube channel where I interviewed Paul. Paul used to be a massive playboy, um, dating coach. He was famously on the Dr. Phil show, with which was filmed in front of live audience of women, and he was saying that he was just actively going out, meeting women and dating and just doing as he wishes. And it was seemed quite controversial, but I always looked up to Paul on that interview because I thought, well, at least he's speaking his truth, and he's a masculine guy, and we talked about in the last interview about perhaps being in a bit more of a feminized world and what's really going on with men, and also just this sort of the world we're in, like because Paul would just go up to women in New York and just chat to them on the street, get phone numbers, and that was very outside the box thinking. I loved that, and I did that as well. And then Paul was just really confident, great masculine role model for me to follow and learn more. So it was great to meet up with him and caught up with him a few times in London. I've been dying to do this interview because since his marriage now, he's just recently had a daughter. So congratulations, Paul, on that. And it's it'd be just really interesting to pick up from that interview and what sort of happened in your life, without obviously getting too personal, and just how that shaped your
Yeah,
way of viewing things.
yeah, I'm happy to take you through the timeline. Anyhow, thanks for having me, Chris. Always a pleasure. I find you uh, always have interesting questions and are always such a polite, friendly guest, and have always been great when we've met in person. Um, and some of the stuff we talked about earlier before the interview started about how moving away from pickup and how like the world has changed with COVID and all that. So we'll touch on that. Um, so I'm 45. That's smack in the beginning of, or the middle. It's middle age, and it's a very different stage of life. Since we last spoke, I got married in 2015, which is Jesus 6 years nearly. Will be 6 years this summer. 3 years ago, I had a daughter, and that's like as everyone always says. And if you don't have children, and you, I mean, it's crazy. It's such a huge life event. Everything changes after that, and this we're possibly thinking about having another kid, and we can talk about that. I mean, it's the best thing ever, but also everything in your life gets turned upside down. And my daughter's like the joy of my life. Um, yeah, and as far as professionally, a few years ago I launched a product called Playboy to Papa, talking about how to transition from being single and like a man about town into a functioning, committed relationship and all the responsibilities, and also choosing the right woman for that. Because it's one thing to date or sleep with knuckleheads, but like obviously you don't want to like make a long-term plan with a girl who's not of top character and stuff. So I launched a product around that that's been successful, and my dating business keeps going. I still coach guys in that, but additionally, I teach. I'm an academic tutor, and I also do some real estate. So we've got kind of an entrepreneurial thing in the house, and it's nice because my wife and I can work together on these projects. And some are passive income, some are active income I earn by working. So yeah, we have a pretty good life, and we live, as you know, in London, in North London, and yeah, I mean, and also on the sad side, I lost my father a couple of years ago. He passed away in 2018, and my mother's quite ill and at the end of her life now. And one thing, which is kind of unexpected, because she was in quite good health, but she got cancer, and it's very advanced. And I think one thing that's unexpected for me is that middle age, all of a sudden, you're kind of in the middle of two groups, like children, if you have them, that you have to caretake, and then elderly parents who are they have physical difficulties. Even if someone's in good health when they 70 and 80, you start to have to take care of them, and they're in decline. They require attention and money and focus, and it's like it's a hard period, the middle ages, I find, because or midlife, because I have a lot of responsibility on both sides, to my daughter and to my sick mother and previously to my father. So it's like the fun times are different. I mean, it's a very heavy period generally for
Mm.
people. I want to talk about this in a minute. It doesn't have to be a sad interview or heavy interview, but huge change between my carefree 20s and early 30s to what I have now. Although what I have now is more durable and
Mm.
more, but it is, and on top of that, we have COVID, which is like crazy. causing like all kinds of distortions.
Mm.
So anyhow, that's me up to speed. One thing would be interesting to talk about for you. I know you're not in the active pickup world as much, but like how that's all changed. Because I'm not my ear's not I don't have my ear to the ground, but
Mm.
how is like pickup and going up to women on the street and casual dating, like is that people still have needs and young people still have a lot of hormones, but how's that changed by these lockdowns and all this COVID and this disease and stuff? I mean, it must be a challenging time to be young, I think.
Yeah, I think it is, and everyone is frustrated, equally women, with guys. But there seems to be this time now where people are just becoming, like I said, I'm feeling a bit more calm about it. Maybe the pressure's off. A lot of people felt, especially in London, maybe this pressure of, you need to meet someone, I need to be dating all the time. I don't know in terms of the Tinder world. Like, I've always stayed clear of that. I've always been more about meeting people in person. And as I shared with you, I have still met people in the lockdown, whether on the street or not. It's a lot more difficult. I think in particular, if you say at the moment, I wouldn't speak to someone who is wearing a mask, for example, like a woman who's wearing a mask.
Why? Because they might
I
it's
think they
it's
just be
a
a
weird
bit.
social thing, or
I
you
think
can't
so.
see their face and you're wondering.
Yeah, yeah, that as well. But I think on the street, I mean, there was one girl I spoke to on the tube who, and you could sort of see she was quite smiley in her cheekbones. But just I mean, we talked about this last time, Paul. It's good to just to touch in what we talked about last time, how like London, there's this energy of, you said like on the bus, no one talks to each other, and it's just really awkward. But I think now it's like awkward times 10. In terms of the energy out there, it's very dead on the street. It's kind of, yeah, and you're seeing all these signs like stay 2 meters away, don't go near it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like social distancing. So if you approach someone, they're already going to be like, "Whoa, what are you doing?"
Yeah, I mean, I come from this mindset of just act like nothing's going on, and I think if you're like that, and with a couple of dates that I've been on, they appreciate it. And this woman I'm elbowed to, she was like, "I'm glad you kissed me on the cheek instead of doing the elbow touch thing." So she was but she was quite
So
similar to me.
but how do people date? How do you go on dates now? I guess it's walking dates, a coffee and a stroll. It's like
Yeah, well,
outdoors,
I
right?
mean, I still probably couldn't tell you too much about that now, but I would assume that that's what's happening. But some people have voiced their frustrations of like someone, they went on a date with someone and they were wearing a mask and they wanted to stay 2 meters away from them. So I think for me, it's already put people in a different category now, because I think I just can't, that's a bit too much for me. I'm very sensitive, so I couldn't really probably go on a date with someone who had to wear a mask and stay away from me, because as you want to touch and get to know each other a bit more, and that just feels like you're not even human beings. It feels like so I mean, that
Mm.
it's probably something in a supermarket or on the tube. Obviously people are wearing the masks and stuff like that, so
I'm
it's
just thinking as you're talking, like if my sort of single life peaked during this pandemic, because I was out there like kissing all kinds of girls, chasing girls, approaching all the time in New York. Obviously, this was, you know 2005 to 2010, like very different period, and um, yeah, none of that would have been possible. Even just my casual dates at my lounge, Opia, where I'd meet the girls, like obviously they're closed now, but when you do meet, you have a mask. I mean, I sympathize with young people. I know the
mm,
digital platforms are more active, but I just wanted to get a flavor from someone who's younger and perhaps, but I our mutual friend Pete was saying that he knows a guy who's like cleaning up out there, and as far as like casual sex, he's meeting these girls, and everyone's lonely, so they're bouncing back to flats. I mean, so he says he's doing better than ever with this COVID thing. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely people are lonely, and there's definitely a craving a human touch. If you're single. Um, but yeah, I wanted to focus today just on what I call the middle-age cliff, which is,
mm,
I would say, like the years 40 to 50 for men, and the I try to be. It's tough not to be judgmental because I've made certain choices that I believe are right for me. But that's actually the key. They're right for me. I have no right projecting them onto other men because they might not be right for them. But so I
mm,
have to keep that. I have to keep that because a lot of like married people are smug and like, oh, we made the right choice and all that. And I know that single life, there has been elements of, or times when single life is kind of shamed, like why didn't you meet someone, why aren't you?
mm,
I don't want to fall into that trap. Um, But I will say that, like, I have some friends who've carried the bachelor torch into the 40s and 50s, and I think that's tough. I mean, I think what happens in middle age is, and ask me any questions if you want, because you're, at your age, you're kind of
Mm,
looking in and through your 30s, like what happens next. Um, and I have my experience to go off. It's yeah, what happens in the 40s is, first of all, most people get quite sequestered in their pod with their family, so it's like you don't have people running around like you do in 20s and 30s. Like most people lead pretty sedate lives, I think. Forget about COVID. Just like, they're with their partner or their family and they're doing their own thing. So I think it'd be harder to corral like a bunch of mates to do stuff in my mid 40s than it was in my 20s or 30s. I mean, that was one of the big writing on the wall for me was when my good male friends started to drop off, and I realized, like, this was happening at about 30 to 35.
mm,
Like, what's next for me? Because they became so, I'm totally engrossed in my family life. I mean, I work.
mm,
I mean, it is COVID, so everything's weird, but you know, my focus is my wife and my daughter, and to some degree my mother and like a couple of friends, but and work. So I don't have a lot of bandwidth for friends even at the moment. Like, so it just becomes harder to maintain. Now, you could look at some guys who've totally rejected that and they're out every night at Soho House and stuff. I think there's a different play that to be had, where you're out and you're a man about town, but that's such a different lifestyle. And I do have some friends who are doing that. Some are more gentlemanly and they like to go out and like spend the money out on the scene. And then others guys are just, some of them are mutual friends of ours, but
mm.
former pickup artists are just traveling around Europe trying to shag, and they're kind of in these remote locations. But I don't know, that's a lot of effort too.
Yeah, it's a
You
lot of
get tired.
energy. It's like it becomes your whole life. And I've gotten like deeper into this, Paul. I've done the recent videos because I've been doing a lot of therapy actually, and I've ended that now. And it was actually to do with deeper childhood wounds that lead to, yeah, wanting to seduce a woman, get with a woman, and then leave the woman, then go after another woman. Obviously a lot of guys will say, well, that's just our DNA. But I think the constant need to do that, like you said, to the point where it's gone way beyond what you've been doing, like you've married and you've had a daughter. Imagine if you just kept going, it would, if that was all your energy. And then people compare to like George Clooney and these kind of guys, but they're actors, and they're not chasing women, that they've got women coming to them. I was just listening to
Yeah, I mean, I think that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was listening to an interview like Russell Brand, and back in the day, he was very much out there and had loads of women knocking on his door, but he was kind of living his life as well, as with say like George Clooney. But I think a lot of these guys, I know what you mean. In the pandemic, say, I know I've heard of one or two people who went to Sweden, for example, and then just kept doing day game all the time because there wasn't a lockdown and you could go on the street. And it's just okay, well, doing that all the time, it's like what becomes the purpose of your life? Is it just chasing women? And then what else have you built? Then maybe your life doesn't. And I think some women pick up on that as well, and they think, well, this guy's not got much else to his life apart from this. Is he actually passionate about something? Is he actually building something?
Yeah, I think most guys, if they do that and they get sucked into that, if they're
Mm.
clever enough, they try to turn it into a business, like
I
I
think that's the
did.
way. Yeah, that's the only way you
And then
can.
at least you can make money and like help other people. But that also, I think, has a shelf life.
Yeah,
Um, I mean,
as
from
with
where I
me as
sit,
well. Yeah.
I consider myself quite fortunate that I got off the merry-go-round, and I'm very happy with my choice. But it'd be interesting to get someone on the show or interview in the later,
Mm,
someone who's chosen a bachelor life and is very happy with it, because there are, for sure, there are benefits like
mm,
full autonomy. Like, I mean, I can't just book a trip and go to Ibiza if I want to. I have to
mm,
discuss with my wife. We do everything together, and it also costs a lot more with her and my daughter and all that. And like, if we have another kid, like, families tie you down in a way. But that's indisputable. However, um, so you lose that freedom. You also, a bachelor, his money is his own. Like, it's only about indulging his
mm.
desires. He has full autonomy, can make a decision at the drop of a hat, can live places. All of that's pretty appealing. And you don't have any accountability. But it reminds me of that Janis Joplin song, like, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. So, like, yeah, you have a lot of freedom, but that's because you don't have anything of value that's holding you
Mm,
down. It's a trade-off. Like I think it can, that sort of drifting lifestyle, I think it can be cool in the 20s, and I was that way in the 30s, but I think it's a harder it's a harder narrative to maintain in the 40s, especially because most people, it's just not the typical
mm,
narrative. Most people settle down, and that has its own difficulties, like which, choosing the right partner and all these challenges. I mean, I have friends who all have chosen their partners, and now, like in London, to get very practical, it's like, you have to earn. It's very expensive to have a family in London, like raising a child and two children, and you need a space and childcare. Like a lot of my friends I know are married, but it's like having kids is, although a lot of people do want children. I think it's it's a huge wall that they look at in terms of, oh my god, if we do this, then the amount of funding and outgoing that we need to do, and it's true, it's hard. I mean, it gets easier, but like the first, I mean, it's a credible bombshell in your life, a child, and
mm,
everything was turned upside down. And that's even from a guy I had pretty decent passive income at a point, and like we were quite established, my wife and I, like we knew each other well. Like it's still difficult. So yeah, it's hard, but the fruits of that, if this is all cliche a bit, but like it's like having children. It's like you have moments that you can't have any other way. Like when my daughter's goofing around or we're chasing each other. Like you can't, unless you have children, you can't enjoy those moments. So that it's a worthwhile thing to build towards, but there's a lot of sacrifice in it. And what I was saying earlier,
mm,
which is difficult about middle age, is that like mortality starts to weigh. I told you my father passed away 2 years ago, and
mm,
I had that loss. And but I was close with both my parents. I mean, I wasn't estranged or anything, so I felt that. And then my mom, whom I was very close with, is ill and towards the end of her life, and I will lose her soon, and then have no parents, living parents. And thank God I have a daughter and a wife to like
mm,
counterbalance that, because I think they're not substitutes, but there is a continuity. I can look now
mm,
to the next. I look at my daughter and perhaps another child is like, okay, that's the legacy. That's their life now is the focus. And one day I'll die, and hopefully it's. But I think to lose parents and have no plan, like be alone with no partner and no children, I think it can be quite. That'd be a very difficult thing to process. And
yeah.
I'm an only child as well. I have a
Mm,
half sister, but my mom, I'm the only child. So I mean, if I was still doing my sort of one man show in New York, and my mom was dying and my father was gone, I think I'd have some tough moments. I think because I'd realize I'd feel very alone.
yeah.
Whereas having family is a buttress to that, obviously. So
Yeah.
it's important to think about.
Definitely, Paul.
But
No, I can relate to a lot of what you said. And like I
and
said,
I think the upshot, that just quickly, the sort of
yeah,
the higher level message is that, like, I think every decade, in my opinion, kind of has a purpose. I think, like, I don't have to go too far back, but like let's say your teens, you're developing and it's school, then like
mm,
I'd say like the 20s, learn about yourself and get your education. And then 30s, I'd say really flex your muscle, whatever expertise you have or skill or talent, like really run it
mm,
and get that. And that's 30s maybe are the decade of indulgence. And then you do stuff for yourself, you travel, you shag the girls, you make whatever. Because the 40s, in a lot of ways, in my experience, is like it's much more about like I have an obligation to work to fund a family. So there's my daughter has a roof over her head and nursery fees are paid. And my wife has the freedom to look after it. Like it's but the 40s, there's a lot more sacrifice. But
mm,
it's also satisfying because I see what I'm building with them. But it's so I think if you want to play your life right, is my opinion. And there's some interesting articles about that. Pete and I talked about that on the
mm,
podcast. You kind of want to think about your 20s in a certain way, maybe think about your 30s in a certain way, your 40s. So try to get what you want to get in your 30s, and
yeah,
then make some deliberate decisions to shift gears in your 40s and 50s. Because I think it's a I think it's a bad move to kind of think that every decade is the same and you're going to play it the same way. I mean, your body, my body's not what it was at 45
mm,
and 20. I'm not as horny, for example. So
mm.
chasing girls now would be kind of strange compared to when I was in my late 20s. I mean,
Yeah,
I was much more up for it then, So it
yeah,
made
yeah.
sense to do that. So I think for men who are trying to, you might spend some time thinking about what you want your life to look like, and kind of, there's nothing wrong with having a selfish decade, but like do what you need to do then, and then like, easier said than done. I mean, shifting lifestyle, but I
Yeah.
kind of look at my life a little bit and overlay this idea that I kind of done very different things at different stages, you know?
Yeah, no, Paul, it makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I can relate what you're saying as well about having that freedom. And I've gone through that. I've moved from place to place and traveled around. And yeah, when I went to other countries as well and on my own, it's like you did feel a bit lonely as opposed to you go with other people. And like I cut all my items down and had like 2 suitcases of material possessions, still travel quite light. And it's like I'm
Where'd you
traveling.
go?
Was that? Well, I've been to like places in Europe. I went to Nepal for I don't know if that was after the last interview. Yeah, I went there for 6 months and
But to Kathmandu?
to Pokhara. But I went to Kathmandu and then Pokhara, and I did trekking and I was learning off like the yogis and
Was
did
that
lots of.
cool?
Oh yeah, it was amazing, but it was like time stood still. And in a way like a relief of when you're in London and like you said, when you're in that where you were, like maybe that was my lifestyle as well in London, where you're going around looking to meet women on Oxford Street or whatever, and then you're in this place in Nepal where it's just you're in the mountains and there's probably no women really to chase. So you then realize, okay, but I'm feeling better without it. And I think we talked about it last time, how it can be an addiction to the point where you're constantly chasing. And I think the overall thing I got was, yeah, maybe this just not growing up. And I think maybe our development had been delayed, or particularly with mine and maybe some other people, that for 20s and 30s, early 30s, maybe you were a bit of a loser in school, and then you didn't really know anyone, and then all of a sudden you start getting interested in, women start liking you, or you start realizing you can step out of society's expectations and learn self-development and all these things. But then eventually I think, like you said, it all has a shelf life, I think, because I think we are looking for happiness really and going deeper down. And the point of what you mentioned, Paul, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, look, masculinity as well, like as a good thing out of, your playboy to papa thing. A big part of masculinity as well is having a family and having a home. I think if you're constantly on the move, like that's what I feel now. It's like I feel like I need a base, and I don't think maybe it is it here in London, but now I'm sort of looking, where is my home? I want to build a home, a shelter. I'd love to have a family, and I'd love to build a legacy and purpose, because you've got, like you said, if you were a playboy, you'd have no legacy. It's like you would just be born, you'd that's it, and now imagine you've got a family and you could maybe pass on generation. Maybe you have a boy next, and you then teach, and then you create some sort of legacy, and then maybe you leave something behind. You work on a project. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on that take. And also, Paul, I'm curious to know where your more or less your purpose focuses other than the family life, because I know you're doing the diapers off, and you seem quite
Yeah,
passionate about talking
I
about
was.
these
I mean, that
topics.
was an interesting project, and actually, Pete and I are thinking of reigniting that on Clubhouse using one of those
Yeah,
apps.
yeah.
The difficulty with that pet project was, as I got older, when I was very fortunate because I had a business that made good money and I didn't have to work much at it. Once I set up my dating business, it kind of was. I was one of the early guys, and my partner was good. We did it well, and so we made a lot of money easily for a long time. Um, Including when I moved to London, which allowed me to kind of dip in and out of stuff and enjoy my life and meet friends. And Pete and I started a project that was really great, but of course made no money, called Diapers Off. And then we got to the point where we had an audience that potentially we could start to sell a trickle of advertising, but and we just found it quite difficult. And what happened, I think, ultimately was, um, my daughter was born, and Pete and I also were there was some tension because it's a lot of effort to build something without getting compensated for it. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, so you need to. As I had more and more responsibility, I had to account for those hours. Like if I'm going to do something for 4 hours, I have to make some money at it somehow. So it became a point where like pet projects, and Pete and I were different from 10 years, so I had different pressures on myself. But he too, I mean, he was working on a bunch of projects. So I think we kind of said, let's hit the pause button because we can't afford to keep the quality of the show up and
Mm,
do it for free. but of course, who's going to pay you in the short term for, although Joe Rogan, didn't he sign $100 million contract for his podcast? So of course
Yeah.
you can make money on these over the long haul if you do a good job and
Mm,
get lucky. It's all about perseverance. So we're thinking of starting again, but
mm,
because I have so much responsibility at the moment, I can't. I have a handful of minutes a week or out,
mm,
maybe a couple hours a week free, but I don't have what I use. I don't have 40 hours a week to kind of do
mm,
speculative projects because I'm supporting a family.
mm.
So all the dynamics change in terms of like how I can spend my time and everything, which is fine. I mean, that's everyone's like that. I mean, I'm not unique in that. But something you said did bring up to mind something. Yeah, just as you were talking and sort of summarizing stuff, it's how short life is.
Mm,
It's like I'll be in my 50s at some point, and you get, a 50-year-old man is, I have to also get in better shape, but it's like time flies, and so you don't want to get caught in a rut and like
mm,
keep doing the same thing you were doing and try to carry that behavior. I guess the message is, and you've kind of hinted on that, we need, as men, talking about masculine, we need
mm,
to evolve. We need to
mm,
develop from decade to decade. So we can't be, that's what you're talking about, maturity or immature. You can't, and it's not about being better than anyone else. It's just that
mm,
if you're not mature, the world eats you up. So you need to, and I was in some ways a late mature, like especially career wise, I dicked around a lot, and um, you need to be mature at certain stages, or else life becomes very, very difficult. So like the mindset and attitude that I had at 25, it's not going to work at 45 unless
mm,
I won't be able to hold on to anything, as you kind of alluded to. Like everything will slip through my fingers. Like I need to change. I've had to change my behaviors. I mean, I often get up very early at 6:37. I work full days. I enjoy what I do,
mm,
but and I do a lot of, although now I like it, is quote unquote boring stuff like financial planning and like talking
mm.
about life insurance and all these kind of things that become more necessary when you have a family and plan for the long term, even think about retirement. And these are all things to make my journey smoother as I go forward. But if they're not exciting when you're 25, you want to like, chase blondes
Mm.
on Oxford Street. So I think we all, as men, need to admit that we need to change and mature as we get older.
Yeah, and
So,
yeah,
well, it's
and
the old classic Peter Pan thing, right? Like not wanting to grow up.
yeah, and I think as we sort of not mentioning a point again, but this, I think when you're chasing, and you're going out every lunchtime and getting phone numbers like you were, it's just all of your time, right? And now you're seeing, it's just how you eventually, I think, like you said, with every addiction, it does feel good in the moment. There's certain parts of it, you're drinking alcohol, yeah, maybe when you're with your friends in the bar feels great, the hangover doesn't feel too good. So that's maybe
There's
what you
always a
noticed.
price to pay, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah, and probably actually a lot of money to pay of buying drinks and stuff, or like whatever,
Let me
buying
ask you a
taxis.
question, because you're you're you have a dialogue with a lot of men, as I understand it, like in your meetup groups and your
Mm,
subscribers. And what do you think the hardest thing for men your age, okay, like early 30s, mid 30s, kind of thinking about the next stage? What's the hardest point about maturity? Like, why do they? What part do they not want to give up? What part do men? Where do they not want to grow up? That's why we call the diapers
mm,
off, by the way. It's like men trying to grow up,
yeah,
not
yeah,
not
yeah. No, I'm interested. I
what do
think
you
it's
what do you think here about the hardest thing? Like I can't do that. I don't want to do that. What kind of thought?
I think it's the well, I think it's just the fact of maybe losing freedom.
Mm.
It's an interesting one, really good question. Because I think, for example, in London, a lot of people, they are single and they're just going to work every day. And it's like, I don't think, and the whole COVID thing has happened, and we've actually come back to ourselves to realize, like, well, maybe I don't enjoy going to the office every day now. So I think it is, Paul, I don't feel like I can give you an answer, but I think for me, it's just the way you're talking about it now is maybe it does sound a bit like I could just feel like maybe just this feeling of feeling quite trapped, because you're like, look, I've got no time. I can't go away. I've got a daughter. And you speak to people as well. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this as well. Whenever you phone someone up who's got a baby within the first year or two, they're on the phone for about 5 minutes and like, I've got to go, So it's like,
Yeah, there's always an emergency, like a dirty
Yeah,
trip or whatever. Yeah, yeah. I mean that.
I think
Yeah, I
maybe with
remember.
parents as well, maybe just like, okay, this is how my parents had it, and then they were paying the bills and worrying about this and that, and it's like, I don't want that. I want my freedom. And maybe this link that it makes you more unhappy, but as I'm finding now, Paul, I think a family life and a home and something like that, I think particularly in this where we are now, where it's COVID and maybe everyone in London in a way is just in their shared house share or flat on their own, they're like, I wish I had a family now. I wish I was, maybe that's what people are thinking. Maybe it's time to grow up and mature.
That's interesting. Like COVID. COVID is going to make people reevaluate their lives and like mature a little bit. I mean, just to hear you talk, yes, that's all true. Like I remember years ago, before I even met my wife, I was still like a single guy about 10. I was visiting my mom in LA. This was a long time ago. I'd say like 2005 or something. And one of my closest friends, who he kind of got serious about things much earlier than I did. First of all, I got his girlfriend pregnant, so they got married. But also, he got into a very demanding field in finance where he
Mm.
got paid a lot, but he worked all the time. And I just remember calling him. He was in New York and I was in LA, and I called him, and we were like brothers that we went to college together and stuff. And I was just catching up with him and having a laugh. And he's like, "Listen, I got to go." And I was like, "What?" We were like in the middle of a riff on something, and his wife and the daughter, baby, was like, and he just dropped what he's doing. He had to go, and I just remember having hurt feelings about that, being like, "Oh, I'm not the priority anymore in
Mm.
his life." Like we're like good bros, and he had other stuff he had to tend to, and that's the reality of it. Yeah, parents, it's like they just need to keep the baby from dying. I mean, it's like you're
Mm.
just trying to like survive, and you don't know what the hell you're doing, and you're
Mm.
exhausted. I can't wait till some of my friends here in London start having kids, and they call me and they're like,
Mm.
"Fuck, I can't deal with that."
Yeah, Paul.
Uh,
Maybe one day soon we'll be
yeah,
doing
you can
an
call me anytime
interview.
if you want,
Yeah.
Chris. Yeah, that's it. But it does pass, and the child gets
Mm.
older. Yeah, the thing is, if you, I mean, what are the alternatives? If you, yes, I agree with you. Like
Mm.
freedom is massively curtailed. Uh, you have to make all your decisions jointly. There's all this accountability.
Mm.
There's not a lot of freedom. I mean, you better like your partner because you're with her a lot.
Mm.
This and that. Um, so that's all true. And I did struggle with some of that early on. On the other hand, what's the alternative? Like the only way you can avoid that is to
Mm.
be alone, so you don't like tie your destiny to someone else. But then, as you said, it's like you're doing everything solo. Or the relationships are fleeting. So as soon as you meet the girl, you're already kind of plotting your escape. So she's on her way out before she's even.
Yeah.
And I just think that's tough.
And I think a lot of my relationships in a way with friends and stuff, that they're always changing. It's like, I think even when COVID's hit, even some of my friends maybe were quite scared by it all, and they don't want to come out of the house, and I've been a bit surprised by that. But then to start to see maybe you're quite different people. And I think then as you grow more as well, Paul, because I feel like I'm on this rapid growth, like I told you, I've been doing psychedelics and things like that, and you then just see the world differently. And certain people are stuck in their drama, like I said, I think this is what happens. There's certain guys who are into the pickup stuff maybe, and maybe still, for all I know, still doing it. And it's like, I feel like I've gone to a completely different world now, and I'm like, yeah, that was fun, and it's not really allowed yourself to evolve. And I think for me at least, I didn't feel happy. Maybe they are happy, I don't know. I would probably say they aren't. But I think you can still be happy living that lifestyle. Like you said, I'm still single. I'll still be doing my thing. If I meet someone along the way, great. But I'm not putting all my energy into that, because I think it's, you go through, sometimes you become obsessed with money, don't you? You become obsessed with business, entrepreneurship, you become obsessed with health. So I think we become obsessed in each area. Um, there was one,
Two other questions.
yeah,
One other
sorry,
thing
I'm going to run out of questions, Paul, I think.
um, is that uh, sorry, I'm hungry for lunch, so my brain, my train of thought drifts. But you did say something right there. Oh, yeah. On the other hand, single life, not having a family allows you to like. I mean, this is very stereotypical, but I met Tom Ford once on a plane, and I was talking a little bit.
Mm.
I mean, he's gay and he has a partner, but until recently didn't have a child. and like he was able, because of the not having the distraction of family life, he like built a huge fashion empire. Or like um you have a number of men like that successful in the gay community who necessarily might not have a family, perhaps,
Mm,
or just a single guy who decides, it allows you to focus on your projects. Like that's not all about pickup. I mean, you can be single, and one of the benefits is if you're in a really fully immersed project, like you don't have to make any sacrifices. You can just work as late as you want, sleep at the office. Like that can suit some people who are building a business or something. I mean,
mm,
you can just go full tilt. And so there's, I don't want to poo poo being like a single guy. Like if you have focus and right at that
mm,
period in your life, you're just trying to build something. It can also be great to not have any distractions and your resources are not
mm.
spread out. Like trying to take care for a kid, and so I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah,
definitely.
shoot, go ask your question.
Yeah. Um, yeah, definitely. So I mean, I guess a question I had, which is interesting, I did want to chat to a couple of guys about this, about the pickup industry, and they sort of declined doing an interview about it. I think a lot of people are quite scared to get their opinions out. But what I found is a lot of pickup artists, oh, not a lot, but a couple that I know, the flotation center where I work at this like flotation spa at the moment, and a couple of the guys just came and they're all into spirituality and stuff, and I'm like, hold on, used to be like a, you know, like a pickup guy, right? And then they're sort of like, yeah, I didn't like the industry and all this stuff, and they're slagging it off, and I'm like, oh, maybe we have an interview about it, and they're like, no, I don't want to put my name out there because I'm still teaching girls, you know. So it's like but I think with you, Paul, you just say it as it is, you know. I think you put yourself out there. But what's happening at the moment is there's been massive decline. I don't know. I think I sent you there was a documentary on the BBC, like
Oh yeah, you
exposing.
did send me in Scotland where they kind of did.
Yeah, yeah, and Street
And
Attraction.
I was
The
in a
guys I
movie
learned
or a
off, yeah, they got their YouTube channel deleted, and then straight after, all of the YouTube channel, everyone deleted their YouTube. So I think even those videos you've got, Paul, of you chatting into a woman on the street now, I think there aren't really any videos like that on the internet anymore, at least from what I see. And RSD and stuff like this took a lot of things down. And then you're in this documentary as well. So I was wondering if you had some thoughts on what you think has happened with the pickup, you know, and why it's been chosen for extinction, you could probably say, because it's kind of disappeared now. At least on
yeah,
YouTube.
I mean, I was in it early and kind of
Mm,
fell into it without, um, and we built a business. But then what happened was, a lot of very vocal, angry feminists came up. I mean, there's a lot of unsavory aspects of the pickup industry for sure, like the manipulation, like outright
mm,
coercion, and so I'm not defending that. But then we also had the Me Too movement, and like
mm,
Andrew Cuomo is getting nailed for sexual harassment. He did sound like he made some out of out of bounds comments on
mm,
this. Um, but we're just in this like hyper vigilant mode right now in society where
mm,
women are like really looking to like nail guys, and there's a lot of blame going around. You have to like tread the Me Too movement. You have to tread very, very carefully. Look at Harvey Weinstein and all that. So I think there's men are very cautious about having any kind of stuff out there that hopefully, I mean, in a way, it might help my
mm,
business in terms of like if the market goes away, I'll be one of the few guys with videos out there. I mean, I'm welcoming this change, but um, yeah, I just think there's I think women rightly don't like this idea that they're like subject to manipulation and that
mm,
men are being taught. It would be like, but we're always going to have this controversy. Imagine women taught like gold digger courses, like how to land a rich guy and get his money and divorce him in 90 days and keep half. Like,
mm,
okay, I'm sure that some women have that intention, but if you saw a bunch of seminars where women were
mm,
learning how to marry rich guys and then divorce them and keep half, it would piss guys off. I mean, you'd have a backlash. So it's this idea of like manipulating the other sex. I don't blame women. So that, yeah, I think,
mm,
and women do in many ways control the media, as Dr. Paul used to tell me, because they are the main purchasers of the products that advertised online on television and stuff. So if it
mm.
doesn't, if it rubs a vast majority of women badly, uh, it's probably going to be targeted for
Yeah. I mean,
chastisement or demise.
I think the way that, say, BBC documentary, I mean, it was shocking. I mean, I think everything the BBC puts out is shocking anyway, but in my opinion. But just because one guy in Scotland, which I think he was,
Did they lock that guy up? I read.
yeah. But I think that was a fair point. That of course what this guy is doing, I didn't think was right. I don't, because he was like being very aggressive to women on the street, and they were scared, like they would tell the police or whatever. And I'm sure that rarely happened. I mean, I'm pretty sure that didn't happen to you at any point. So, but to use that as an excuse to then tear down the whole industry, is like is madness, isn't it? But this is the kind of world we're in now. I mean, even with the COVID thing,
Yeah, it's weird. It's interesting. It's like a bad app. I mean, I think most of the men pulled their material themselves, right? They weren't forced to, but they wanted. It was a precautionary thing because they didn't want to get like bad rap or sued or something. I mean, the annoying thing about all this is that obviously people have to talk to each other if they're going to meet, and if a man is attracted to a woman, he's got to make an approach. Like, what are the conditions under which he can do that legally and fairly? And like, it all gets very prescribed about, you can't do this, you can do this. That was flirtation, but that then crossed the boundary into harassment. When I read about some of this stuff, I think, Jesus, I mean, it's sort of all tangled up, and it makes it really nasty and like unpleasant for both sexes. Like, so, and women are like skeptical. So I don't know. Hopefully, in some years' time, we'll move past this moment where it's, but it's not a pleasant moment for people, and certainly, yeah, the business. As I understand, I'd be surprised if there's a lot of new entrants in the pickup world. I mean, for a while there were a lot of gurus teaching this. It's probably massively reduced at the moment, both because of Me Too and because of COVID.
And I think people are scared to even get into it now and talk about it, because of
whatever happened to Julian Blanc and his stuff. I mean,
do you know what?
some of the guys.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Julian's new stuff. I think because he's more into self-improvement now, but he's talked a lot about therapy and just growing yourself. And he was very honest and open. He said the scandal. He said he just wanted to sleep with more women to be happy and stuff. And then he's like, similar to you, Paul. He's married now, I think, and it's just interesting how I think that scandal needed to wake him up. I think he said it woke him up because he was just, maybe at a stage where you were, where at one point he was just like, what am I doing? But also attention seek. He got a lot of satisfaction from telling guys about all the women he slept. In seminars, it's like he needed to tell more guys and all this stuff. And there was a desire in him to put that out there. And then he wanted to blow it up on social media and on the media and stuff and be seen as the bad guy. But once he was aware of that's what he was doing, he sort of let go of it. And I think he's I think his material it's matured. We talked about evolving. Imagine if he was just teaching the same stuff over and over again. I guess it gets boring, because I guess this is with you as well. I mean, like, your seminars in the day were brilliant, but if you were still teaching the same seminar beyond the digits, I think you would probably lose passion for it. And I think that's what's happened with me, Paul, as well, is I was teaching the similar stuff as well, but I couldn't do the same seminar again, because it becomes, unless you're, like you said, you're actively still doing it.
Yeah, I think for me, we should wrap up now because.
Oh yeah, you've got to go. Yeah.
But yeah, for me, once I stopped living the life, like when I got serious with my girlfriend and I wasn't out on the street chasing girls and stuff. Once my lifestyle sort of contracted and shifted away from that, it didn't feel genuine to teach this stuff anymore. So I phased. I mean, I still do have experience, so I still do coach some guys, but I kind of shifted away from it, and we had a legacy product, but I didn't want to keep trying to innovate or talk about this stuff passionately when I wasn't living it. So I think as soon as you and after a guy's done it 5 or 10 years, he probably is going to move on. So I think it's hard to teach these same tactics and be like passionate about pickup for 10 or 15 or 20 years. I mean, I think most guys probably want to do something else or develop out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, all right, Chris. Hey, I appreciate this. This is good. Maybe we have another follow-up one. We'll see what the folks think about our interview. We touched on a bunch of topics though, but the middle age cliff is really the thing that I think a lot of your listeners should key into. It's just that use your 30s for yourself. But if you do want a family, or a lot is going to change when that starts happening, and you won't have the same
Mm.
the rule book gets rewritten when you have a wife and kids. So you definitely want to use your, I think the 30s are a great decade because you have some expertise, you're not so young anymore, but you're not saddled with responsibilities. So kind of use that time for yourself, whether it's 5 years, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's a real good decade for personal fulfillment, I think.
Nice one,
All
Paul.
right.
Thanks for that.